Hello and welcome back to her revenge arc. My name is Alara, and tonight I want to tell you a story. It's not a story of grand battles or epic quests in the traditional sense. It is, however, a story about a quiet war, fought not with swords, but with spreadsheets, whispers, and the silent collective turning of backs. It's a story about the moment the ground beneath my feet, which I had always believed to be solid, turned out to be made of glass, and what happened when I, and every other woman I worked with, decided to let it shatter. It's the story of how we walked out, and in doing so walked into ourselves. Settle in, because this one takes some telling. Before the discovery, before the plan, before the walkout that would come to define my career and in many ways my life, there was the quiet hum of contentment. It was a low, steady thrum, the kind you don't notice until it's gone. My world was one of order, of logic, of data. I was a senior data architect at Innovatech Solutions, a name that probably means nothing to you, but in the world of enterprise software and cloud computing it was a titan. We built the invisible scaffolds that held up the digital worlds of other, more famous companies. It was complex, demanding work, and I was good at it. More than good, I was exceptional. My desk was on the 17th floor of a gleaming glass tower that pierced the city skyline. It was a corner cubicle, a small kingdom I had earned through years of dedication. From my window, I could see the city sprawl out below me, a tapestry of concrete and ambition. In the mornings, the sun would catch the windows of the opposing buildings, and for a few precious moments, my little space would be flooded with a warm golden light. I had 3 thriving succulents on my windowsill: a jade plant, a zebra haworthia, and a burrow's tail, their persistence a small green testament to my own. My monitors were perfectly aligned, my keyboard was free of crumbs, and my mousepad bore the faded logo of a tech conference from 5 years prior. This was my sanctuary, the place where my mind could unfurl and dance with numbers, where I could translate chaotic streams of information into elegant, efficient structures. I believed in meritocracy. I truly did. It was the central pillar of my professional faith. I believed that if you worked hard, if you were intelligent, if you delivered results, you would be rewarded. Innovatech, with its talk of flat hierarchies and valuing talent, seemed to be the very embodiment of this principle. I had started as a junior analyst, fresh out of university with a master's degree in computer science. I had climbed. I had put in the late nights, the weekends spent debugging a critical system failure, the hours of poring over technical documentation, until the words blurred into an indecipherable soup. I had led projects, mentored junior staff, and my name was on several key patents that had become significant revenue streams for the company. I was respected. My opinions in meetings were sought after. My technical solutions were often the ones that were implemented. My direct superior, a man named Mark, was a decent enough manager. He was perpetually stressed, subsisting on a diet of black coffee and protein bars, but he trusted my judgment. "Alara, what's your take on the data pipeline for Project Chimera?" He'd ask, and I would give him a clear, concise, and actionable answer. He'd nod, thank me, and move on. It was a smooth, functional relationship. Then there was Liam. Liam was my peer, another senior data architect. We had been hired within a few months of each other, both with similar qualifications and experience. We worked on parallel teams, our projects often intersecting. We were, for all intents and purposes, counterparts. We had a friendly, professional rivalry. He was good, I'll give him that. His approach was more about brute force, throwing processing power at a problem until it submitted. Mine was more about finesse, finding the elegant, efficient path. We'd often debate the merits of our respective methods over the lukewarm coffee in the break room. "You're overthinking it, Alara," he'd say with a grin. "Just spin up a few more virtual machines. Problem solved." Or, I'd counter, stirring my tea, "We could optimize the query and save the company a few $1,000s a month in cloud hosting fees." He'd laugh, a loud, easy sound that echoed in the small room. "You and your efficiency. One day you'll optimize yourself out of a job." It was harmless banter. Or so I thought. Liam was part of the fabric of my professional life. He was the benchmark against which I measured my own progress. We were equals. In my mind, on the organizational chart, in the intellectual battles we fought in conference rooms, we were the same. It never occurred to me to think otherwise. Why would it? I was a believer, a true believer in the system. The system was fair. The system was logical. The system was just. The day it all began was a Tuesday in late October. The air was turning crisp, and the sky had that particular shade of deep, brilliant blue that only autumn can produce. It was the run-up to the Innovators Summit, our company's most important event of the year. This was our showcase, the day we invited our biggest clients, potential investors, and the tech press to our headquarters to unveil our latest and greatest creations. It was a day of immense pressure and even greater prestige. The entire company shifted into a higher gear for the 2 months leading up to it. The atmosphere was a heady mix of adrenaline, caffeine, and low-grade panic. I was the lead architect on Project Nightingale, the crown jewel of this year's summit. Nightingale was a predictive analytics engine, an AI that could forecast market trends with an uncanny degree of accuracy. It was my baby. I had conceived of the core concept 2 years prior, sketched it out on a whiteboard in a flurry of inspiration, and had since nurtured it from a theoretical model into a powerful functional reality. My team and I had poured our souls into it. The code was a tapestry woven from millions of lines of logic, each one placed with care and intention. That Tuesday, I was preparing a final budget reconciliation report for Mark. It was a tedious but necessary piece of administrative work, accounting for every dollar spent on server time, software licenses, and contractor hours for the final development phase of Nightingale. The finance department needed it for their end-of-quarter accounting, and they were notoriously picky. I sent my completed spreadsheet to the finance portal and headed to the large, industrial printer at the end of the hall to retrieve the hard copy for my files. The machine was whirring and clanking, spitting out a thick stack of pages from someone else's print job. I waited, tapping my fingers on the plastic casing, my mind already jumping ahead to the final pre-summit stress test we were scheduled to run that afternoon. When the machine finally fell silent, I reached in to grab my single-page report. But underneath it was another document, still warm from the fuser. Someone had clearly printed it and forgotten to pick it up. My first instinct, the instinct of a good corporate citizen, was to glance at the header to see who it belonged to so I could return it. The header read, Project Cerberus Q3 Payroll Allocation Summary Confidential. Project Cerberus was Liam's big project. It was the counterpart to Nightingale, a robust new security protocol for our cloud infrastructure. It was also being presented at the summit. My eyes flickered over the page. It wasn't my business and I should have just left it there or dropped it on his desk. I know that. But curiosity is a powerful, insidious thing. And my name was on the document. Down at the bottom, under a section titled Cross-Project Consultation Costs, was my own name, listed next to a number of hours and a calculated cost. I had done some consulting for his team a few months back, helping them integrate a data logging feature. The page was a simple table. Employee name, role, hours billed, and a column that made my breath catch in my throat. Blended hourly rate. I saw the names of the junior developers on his team, the project manager, the quality assurance testers, and then I saw his name, Liam Calloway, Senior Data Architect. And I saw the number next to it. It took a moment for my brain to process it. The number was just a set of digits on a page, abstract and meaningless at first. I scanned the page again, my eyes tracing the lines of the table. I saw my own name again at the bottom. I knew my salary. I knew what my hourly rate translated to, factoring in benefits and other overheads, the standard way finance calculated these things for internal billing. It was a simple matter of division. I stood there in the quiet hum of the deserted hallway and did the math in my head. Once, twice, a third time because the result felt impossible. Felt like a bug in the code of reality. The number next to Liam's name, his blended hourly rate, was 32% higher than my own. 32%. It wasn't a small rounding error. It wasn't a minor discrepancy that could be explained away by a seniority bonus or a niche certification. We were hired at the same time. We had the same title. We led projects of equal importance and complexity. In fact, my project Nightingale was widely considered the more innovative and potentially more profitable of the two. A cold sensation started in the pit of my stomach and spread through my limbs, a creeping chemical ice. The air in the hallway suddenly felt thin and sharp, hard to draw into my lungs. The cheerful, bustling sound of the office 100 feet away seemed to fade into a distant, muffled roar, like the sea heard from inside a seashell. I looked from the number next to his name to the number I had calculated for myself. The disparity was stark. It was a chasm. It was an insult printed in black and white on cheap copy paper. My first thought, born of a lifetime of believing in the system, was that I had made a mistake. My math was wrong. Or maybe the blended hourly rate included some other factor I wasn't aware of. A specialized bonus for security projects? A retention package I didn't know about? I scrambled for a logical explanation, for a reason that would allow me to put the paper back down, walk back to my desk, and let the comfortable hum of my life resume. I tried to build a rational framework around the ugly fact, to contain it, to make it make sense. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the forgotten document trembling slightly in my hand. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I looked down the long carpeted corridor towards my corner cubicle, my little kingdom. The golden morning light was streaming in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It looked the same, but nothing was the same. A crack had appeared in the foundation of my world, and I had the terrifying suspicion that if I looked too closely, I would see it was a fault line that ran deeper and wider than I could possibly imagine. I folded the paper, the creases sharp and definitive, and slipped it into the pocket of my blazer. It felt heavy like a stone. As I walked back to my desk, the familiar sights of the office seemed alien and strange. The faces of my colleagues, the motivational posters on the walls, synergy, innovation, excellence. The very air I was breathing, it all felt different. Felt like a lie. Sitting in my chair, I stared at my perfectly aligned monitors. On the left screen was the elegant architecture of Project Nightingale, a system built on logic, precision, and fairness. On the right was my email inbox, filled with mundane requests and meeting invites. But I couldn't see any of it. All I could see were those two numbers superimposed over everything, his and mine, the 32% gap. It wasn't just about the money. To be clear, the money was significant. Over the course of a year, it was the price of a decent car. Over the course of a career, it was a down payment on a house, a child's college education, a comfortable retirement. It was security. It was freedom. It was a tangible measure of value. But it was the principle of it that truly gutted me. It was the quiet, confident statement, printed on an official company document, that my work, my mind, my contribution, my very worth was 1/3 less than that of my male counterpart. The years of late nights, the skipped lunches, the intellectual and emotional energy I had poured into this company, all of it had been discounted from the start, in a way I had never even been aware of. I had been playing a game, believing the rules were the same for everyone, only to discover that I had started with a handicap I didn't know existed. The friendly rivalry with Liam, the professional banter, the debates over coffee, it all curdled in my memory. I wasn't his equal. In the eyes of the company, the only eyes that truly mattered when it came to compensation, I was his junior. Every good job, Alara, from a manager, every nod of approval in a meeting, now felt like a pat on the head, a condescending gesture to a subordinate who was performing adequately. The respect I thought I had earned suddenly felt like a cheap imitation, a hollow performance. I spent the rest of the day in a fog. I went through the motions, attending meetings, answering emails, running the stress test on Nightingale. I spoke to my team, my voice sounding distant and strange in my own ears. I smiled. I nodded. I performed the role of Alara, the competent and composed senior data architect. But inside, a silent, cold fury was beginning to build. It wasn't a hot, explosive anger. It was a slow, glacial rage, carving new canyons through the landscape of my mind. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I drove to a quiet park overlooking the river. I sat on a cold metal bench and watched the last rays of the sun paint the water in shades of orange and purple. I took the folded piece of paper out of my pocket and smoothed it out on my knee. I read it again, as if the words might have changed. They hadn't. Liam, 32% more. And then a new, more horrifying thought began to form. If it was happening to me, a senior employee with a track record of success, a lead on a flagship project, who else was it happening to? I thought of Sarah in the marketing department, a sharp, witty woman in her late 40s who had been with the company for over a decade. She had a cynical sense of humor but a brilliant strategic mind. I thought of Maya, a bright young engineer on my own team, full of passion and innovative ideas, always the first to volunteer for a difficult task. I thought of Chloe, the head of user interface design, whose elegant and intuitive designs were legendary. I thought of the women in finance, in HR, in legal. Dozens of them. Hundreds across the entire company. Was this an isolated error? A clerical mistake specific to my case? Or was it a pattern? A feature, not a bug, in the operating system of Innovatech Solutions? The cold fury in my gut began to solidify into something else. Something hard and clear and dangerous. It was resolve. I was a data architect. I dealt in patterns, in systems, in structures. I had stumbled upon a single anomalous data point. And I knew with the certainty that chilled me to the bone that I had to find the rest of the dataset. That night, I went home not to sleep but to plan. The first phase was reconnaissance. I couldn't march into HR and demand to see payroll records. That would be professional suicide. They would close ranks, deny everything, and I would be labeled a troublemaker, my career at Innovatech effectively over. No, this had to be quiet. It had to be methodical. It had to be done with the same precision and care that I used to design a database. I started with what I had, the document. It was the key. It proved that the blended hourly rate was a metric the company used. I needed more keys. I spent hours that night on the company's internal network, not hacking but using the access I already had in ways I never had before. I was a senior architect, my security clearance was relatively high. I could access project archives, budget proposals from previous years, and organizational charts that went back a decade. I started cross-referencing. I would find a project proposal from 3 years ago which would list the key personnel. I would then pull up the company's internal directory, which helpfully listed the start date for every employee. I began building a spreadsheet of my own, a shadow ledger. I focused on roles where there was a clear male and female equivalent. Project managers, senior engineers, quality assurance leads. It was painstaking work. I sifted through mountains of digital paperwork, my eyes burning from the screen's glare. With each new data point I uncovered, the picture became clearer and more damning. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just Liam. It was everywhere. A senior male engineer hired in 2018 made more than a senior female engineer with the same title hired in 2016. A male project manager with 5 years of experience was compensated at a rate equivalent to a female project manager with 8. The discrepancies weren't always exactly 32%. Some were smaller, around 15 or 20%. Some, particularly in the sales department where bonuses played a huge role, were even larger. But the pattern was undeniable. It was a systemic structural bias, woven into the very financial fabric of the company. It was a quiet, undeclared tax on being a woman at Innovatech. By 4 a.m., my spreadsheet was a mosaic of injustice. I had names, dates, and, in a few more lucky cases where I'd found other misfiled financial documents, I had the hard salary data to back up my extrapolations. The meritocracy I had believed in was a carefully constructed illusion, a pleasant fiction for people like me to cling to while the system quietly siphoned value away from us. I leaned back in my chair, the first light of dawn graying the window of my study. I felt exhausted but also strangely energized. The rage was still there, a cold pilot light burning steadily inside me. But now it was accompanied by a sense of absolute clarity. The problem was defined. The scope was understood. The next phase could begin. This was no longer just about my salary. This was about Sarah and Maya and Chloe, and every other woman who walked through the doors of that glass tower every morning, believing their hard work was being fairly valued. They deserved to know the truth. And I was going to be the one to tell them. My first recruit was Maya. She was young, barely 25, but she was one of the most brilliant coders I had ever worked with. She had a fiery, idealistic spirit that hadn't yet been dampened by corporate cynicism. She saw the world in terms of right and wrong, and I knew that if I could show her the data, her response would be unequivocal. I caught her in the kitchen the next morning as she was making a cup of tea, her brow furrowed in concentration as she stared at her phone, probably reviewing code. "Maya, do you have a second?" I asked, my voice lower than usual. She looked up, her expression brightening. "Hey, Alara. Sure. What's up? Did you figure out that bug in the caching layer?" "Not that," I said, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "Can we talk? Somewhere private. Maybe take a walk at lunch." Her brow furrowed again, this time in concern. My tone was obviously off. "Yeah, of course. Is everything okay?" "It will be," I said, giving her a small, tight smile that I'm sure was not very reassuring. "Meet me by the lobby at 12. The walk to the nearby park was tense. I didn't speak, and Maya, sensing the gravity of the situation, walked in silence beside me. We found the same bench I had sat on the night before. The river flowed on, indifferent. I didn't start with the spreadsheet. I started with the story. I told her about the printer, about the forgotten document, about the numbers next to my name and Liam's. I watched her face as I spoke. Her initial confusion slowly morphed into a look of dawning horror and disbelief. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No way. Liam? But you're the lead on Nightingale. Everyone knows you're better." The compliment, though well-intentioned, was a painful reminder of the issue. Skill didn't matter. "The data suggests otherwise," I said wryly, and the word data hung in the air between us. "You mean the money?" she clarified, her voice small. "I mean the money," I confirmed. "But it has to be a mistake," she said, echoing my own initial denial. "Maybe he negotiated harder when he was hired. That's the thing, right?" "Maybe," I conceded. "But what if it's not? What if it's not just me?" That's when I took out my phone. I had transferred my shadow ledger to a secure, password-protected file. I opened it and handed the phone to her. I had highlighted her own row. I didn't have her exact salary, but I had found the budget for a small project she had led 6 months ago. It listed her, the project's sole developer, and her calculated internal cost. I had then found a similar project, led by a male developer with 1 year less experience than her. His internal cost was predictably 22% higher. She stared at the screen, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. I saw her eyes flick back and forth between the two lines, the two numbers. I saw the same sequence of emotions I had experienced play out across her face. Denial, confusion, a desperate search for a rational explanation, and then finally the chilling acceptance of an ugly truth. "Oh my God," she breathed. She looked up from the phone, her eyes wide and shining with unshed tears of anger. "All of them? You found this for all of them?" "As many as I could get data for," I said quietly. "The pattern is consistent." She was silent for a long time, just staring out at the river. The fire I had expected was there, but it was banked controlled. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and steady, laced with steel. "What are we going to do?" It was the question I had been waiting for. It was the question I had been asking myself all night. The we was crucial. This was no longer just me. It was us. "First," I said, "we get more data. And then we get more allies." That was how it started. Maya became my lieutenant. We were a two-woman insurgency, operating in the shadows of the corporate behemoth. Our methods were discreet. We used encrypted messaging apps to communicate. We met for coffee in cafes blocks away from the office. Maya was younger, more social. She was able to talk to the other junior women in a way I couldn't, gathering anecdotal evidence, testing the waters, identifying potential allies without ever revealing the full scope of what we knew. I focused on the older, more senior women. This was a harder task. Many of them, like Sarah from marketing, were veterans of a different era. They had fought their own battles to get where they were, and they were wary of rocking the boat. My meeting with Sarah took place in a quiet, dimly lit wine bar a week later. She sat across from me, swirling a glass of deep red Cabernet, her expression unreadable. Sarah was sharp, pragmatic, and had a finely tuned bullshit detector. I couldn't approach her with idealism. I had to approach her with facts. I laid it out for her just as I had for Maya, but with a different emphasis. I focused on the financial implications, the sheer monetary value that had been denied to us over the years. I showed her the data I had compiled for the marketing department, where the pay gap seemed to be just as pervasive as in tech. She listened without interruption, her eyes narrowed, taking it all in. When I was finished, she took a long, slow sip of her wine. "Let me tell you a story, Alara," she said, her voice smooth and even. "When I started here 15 years ago, there was only one other woman on the entire marketing floor. My first boss told me not to wear trousers because it was unladylike. I had my ideas stolen in meetings so many times I lost count. I had to work twice as hard as the men around me just to be considered half as good. I fought, I clawed, I bit my tongue until it bled, and I got here. I have a nice office, a good title, and I can afford to send my kids to a good school. And you're telling me I should risk all of that?" Her words were not a rejection but a test. She was asking me if I understood the stakes. "I'm not asking you to risk it, Sarah," I replied, my voice calm. "I'm telling you that all of that is less than you've earned. It's less than you're worth. They've been banking on the fact that you'll be grateful for the scraps they've given you. So grateful you won't ask why your plate isn't as full as the man's next to you. The fight you thought you won? You didn't. You just got to a higher paid level of being underpaid." She stared at me, her mask of cool cynicism cracking just a little. I saw a flicker of the young, ambitious woman she must have been, the one who was told not to wear trousers. "The Innovator Summit is in 5 weeks," I continued, pressing my advantage. "The company's entire reputation for the next year will be on the line that day. It is the single point in the year where they are most vulnerable, and we are most essential." A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. It was a dangerous, calculating smile. "You're not just a data nerd, are you, Alara? You've got a little bit of a revolutionary in you." She took another sip of her wine, then set the glass down with a soft click. "Okay, I'm in. But if we do this, we do it right. No half measures. We need to be organized. We need to be united. And we need to be absolutely silent until the moment we strike." With Sarah on board, our small rebellion gained a new level of strategic sophistication. She knew the people, the politics, the hidden levers of power within the company. She was our spymaster. Together, the three of us, the architect, the idealist, and the spymaster, began to build our army. We created a secret mailing list, using a secure, anonymous service. Sarah dubbed it the Nightingale Network. We started with a handful of trusted names and asked each of them to discreetly vouch for one other person. The network grew slowly, carefully, one woman at a time. Each new member was brought into the fold through a quiet conversation, a shared document, a moment of dawning, furious recognition. The stories we heard were heartbreakingly similar. A woman in legal who discovered she was being paid less than a male colleague she had personally trained. A designer whose request for a promotion had been perpetually delayed, while less qualified men were promoted around her. A sales director who noticed her mail reports were given better leads and more lucrative territories. The pay gap was the symptom. The disease was a culture of systemic undervaluation. Our spreadsheet grew, validated by dozens of personal testimonies. It was no longer a shadow ledger, it was a manifesto. We held our first group meeting in a rented community hall on a rainy Sunday afternoon. About 30 women showed up. The air was thick with a strange mixture of fear, anger, and a fragile nascent hope. I stood at the front of the room looking at their faces. These were the women I saw every day in the elevators, in the cafeteria, in meetings. But I was seeing them for the first time as a collective, a silent, unrecognized power. I presented our findings. I put the spreadsheet up on a projector screen, the names anonymized but the roles and numbers starkly clear. A wave of murmurs and sharp intakes of breath rippled through the room. For many, it was the first time they were seeing the full, ugly scope of the problem. We spent the next 2 hours brainstorming. What should we do? The options were laid out. We could go to the press, But that risked a long, messy public battle that could damage all of our careers. We could file a class action lawsuit, but that would take years and enrich the lawyers more than anyone else. We could try to negotiate with HR, but we all knew HR's primary function was to protect the company, not the employees. It was Maya, her voice ringing with passionate conviction, who first said the word out loud. We should walk out. A hush fell over the room. The idea was terrifying. It was radical. On what day? Someone asked from the back. And it was Sarah, her voice cool and strategic, who provided the answer. On the day of the Innovator Summit, at 10 a.m., precisely when Mr. Davies is scheduled to begin his keynote address to a room full of our biggest clients and investors. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a declaration of war. It was also, I realized, the only option that had a chance of working. It was a move so bold, so disruptive, that the company could not ignore it. It targeted their two most vulnerable points, their public image and their revenue stream. The debate that followed was fierce. Some women were afraid, and rightly so. They had mortgages, children, families to support. A walkout could lead to termination. We talked through the risks, the potential fallout. But as we talked, a sense of collective power began to build in the room. The fear was still there, but it was being overshadowed by something stronger. A shared sense of profound, righteous anger. I explained the plan in more detail. It wouldn't be a strike in the traditional sense. It would be a single, coordinated action. We would walk out, together, and gather at a prearranged location. We would have a clear, concise list of demands ready, not just for pay equity and back pay, but for a complete overhaul of the company's compensation and promotion practices, including full transparency. We would give the company an ultimatum: meet our demands, or the women of Innovatech would not be returning to work, and the story of why would be sent to every major news outlet in the country. By the end of the meeting, we took a vote, a secret ballot. The result was nearly unanimous. The plan was set. The date was marked. The Nightingale Network was about to sing. The next 4 weeks were the most surreal of my life. On the surface, everything was normal. I went to work, I led my team, I put the finishing touches on Project Nightingale. I had meetings with Mark, with Liam, with other executives. I smiled, I nodded, I played my part. But underneath, the secret war was in full swing. Our network had swelled to include nearly every non-executive woman in the company, over 150 of us. The administrative assistants, the marketers, the engineers, the designers, the accountants. We communicated through our secure channels, finalizing the plan, shoring up courage, making sure everyone was ready. Sarah proved to be a genius of logistics, coordinating everything from our off-site meeting point to the drafting of our official statement. Maya was our morale officer, a constant source of positive energy, reminding us why we were doing this. My role was to be the calm center of the storm. I was the keeper of the data, the one who had started it all. I felt a profound sense of responsibility to every single woman who had placed her trust in me. There were nights I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. What if someone leaked the plan? What if half the women got scared and backed out at the last minute? What if the company simply fired all of us and dared us to sue? The days leading up to the summit were a blur of tension. The office was buzzing with an electric, festive energy. Banners were hung in the lobby. The main auditorium was being prepped with a massive stage and elaborate lighting. Executives flew in from our international offices. There was a sense of corporate self-congratulation in the air that was almost nauseating. They were all so proud of themselves, so blissfully unaware of the iceberg dead ahead. I saw Liam in the hallway the day before the summit. He looked stressed but excited. "Big day tomorrow, Ilara," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Ready to show them what we've got?" I looked him in the eye, a cool, calm smile on my face. "I am. It's going to be a day nobody at this company will ever forget." He laughed, misinterpreting my meaning completely. "That's the spirit. May the best project win." "Oh, I think it will," I said. The morning of the Innovator Summit dawned gray and overcast, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I stood in front of my closet for a long time, choosing my armor for the day. I selected a sharply tailored navy blue suit, It was professional, powerful, and unassuming. I did my makeup with unusual care. Not to look pretty, but to create a mask of impenetrable composure. Driving to work, my hands were slick on the steering wheel. My heart was a steady, heavy drum against my ribs. I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes when you have passed the point of no return. The decision was made. The die was cast. All that was left was to watch it land. The office was in a state of organized chaos. People were rushing around, clutching tablets and coffee cups. The energy was infectious, and for a moment, I felt a pang of something like nostalgia for the innocent belief I had once had in this place. I went to my desk, booted up my computer, and began my morning routine just like any other day. At 9:30 a.m., a message went out on the Nightingale network from Sarah's anonymous account. It was a single simple word. Ready. All over the building on 150 different screens that word appeared. It was the final confirmation, the signal that the plan was in motion. At 9:45 a.m. I saw Mr. Davies, our CEO, stride through the office, flanked by a coterie of VPs. He was a man in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and a booming voice. He projected an aura of paternalistic authority. He was on his way to the auditorium to give his opening keynote, the speech that would kick off the day's events. He passed my cubicle and gave me a hearty smile. "Alara, looking forward to your Nightingale presentation this afternoon. I'm hearing great things." "Thank you, Mr. Davies," I replied, my voice perfectly even. "I hope we don't disappoint." At 9:55 a.m., I closed all my work windows. I left my computer on, my email inbox visible on the screen. I stood up and put on my blazer. My hands were perfectly steady. I looked out across the vast open-plan office. I caught Maya's eye 2 rows down. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. I saw Sarah, across the floor in the marketing section, discreetly slipping her phone into her purse. At 9:59 a.m., I took a deep breath. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of applause from the auditorium down the hall as Mr. Davies was introduced on stage. The show was beginning. And then my phone and 150 other phones vibrated with a new message. It was a line from a poem we had chosen as our code. "The time to sing is now." It was 10 a.m. I pushed my chair back. The sound was unnervingly loud in the relative quiet of the office floor. I picked up my purse and my coat. I took one last look at my little kingdom, the succulents on the windowsill, the view of the city, and I turned my back on it. I started walking towards the elevators. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. I was just one woman walking away from her desk. I felt a spike of pure panic. Had I miscalculated? Was I alone? And then I heard it. A sound that started as a whisper and grew into a symphony. The sound of other chairs pushing back. To my left, Maya stood up. Then the other 2 women on her team. Across the floor, Sarah stood. And then her entire all-female marketing strategy unit rose as one. I saw Chloe from design, her face a mask of determination, stand up from her desk. The quiet, efficient assistants from the executive support pool stood up. The accountants from finance. The testers from QA. One by one, then in small groups, then in a silent, swelling wave, the women of Innovatech stood up. They gathered their belongings, their faces composed and resolute, and they started walking. They merged into a silent stream in the main aisle, all heading in the same direction. Towards me. Towards the exit. The men in the office, who had been focused on their screens, began to look up, their faces a mixture of confusion and curiosity. What was this? A fire drill? A special all-hands meeting for the women? I saw Mark, my manager, step out of his office, a perplexed look on his face. "Alara? Maya? Where is everyone going?" he called out. No one answered. We just kept walking. The stream became a river, a silent, determined procession of women in suits and dresses, heels clicking softly on the polished concrete floor. We flowed past the glass-walled conference rooms, past the motivational posters, past the bewildered faces of our male colleagues. There was no shouting, no chanting, no drama. Just the profound, undeniable power of our collective absence. We reached the bank of elevators. We pressed the down buttons and waited. The first elevator arrived, and the doors opened. We filled it in silence, shoulder to shoulder. As the doors closed, I saw Mark's face, his mouth slightly agape, staring at us as we descended. More elevators arrived, and the process repeated. A silent, orderly, and complete evacuation. When we stepped out into the grand lobby of the building, the security guards looked at us in alarm. A river of over 150 women was pouring out of the elevators and walking calmly towards the main revolving doors. One of them spoke into his radio, his voice urgent. But we didn't stop. We pushed through the doors and out into the gray, overcast morning. The cool air hit my face, and for the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. We had done it. We had walked out. We gathered on the wide plaza in front of the building. A silent, formidable crowd. Sarah was already there, directing us towards the corner, away from the main entrance, to a coffee shop we had designated as our headquarters. As we stood there, a sudden collective impulse rippled through the group. One by one, we took out our phones. We opened our company email and messaging apps. And we all in unison set our status to away. Inside the building we had just left, chaos was erupting. We didn't have to see it to know it. We could imagine it. In the auditorium, Mr. Davies would be well into his keynote, speaking glowingly about the talent and dedication of his employees. And on the 17th floor and the 16th and the 12th, managers would be looking at acres of empty desks. They would be calling out names with no response. They would be sending messages that would go unread. Phones would start ringing. Mark would be calling me. Liam would be calling Maya. VPs would be calling their directors. The realization would dawn, slowly at first, then with sickening speed, that this was not a drill. This was not a coincidence. Every single woman on their teams was gone. The presentation for Nightingale, my project, was scheduled for 2 p.m. My entire core team, except for 2 very junior male coders, was female. The project could not be presented without us. The same was true for a half-dozen other key presentations scheduled for the day. The Innovators Summit, the company's proudest moment, was currently falling apart from the inside. We filed into the coffee shop, which we had practically booked out for the morning. The mood was electric. The fear and tension had been replaced by a heady cocktail of adrenaline, relief, and a fierce, joyful solidarity. Women who had only ever exchanged polite nods in the hallway were now hugging, laughing, sharing stories. The dam of silence had broken. Sarah, Maya, and I stood at the center of it all. We had become an impromptu leadership council. We let the energy swirl for about 15 minutes, and then Sarah called for quiet. "Okay, everyone," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Phase 1 is complete. They know we're gone. Phase 2 is about to begin. In approximately 5 minutes, they're going to start panicking. They're going to try to call us. Do not answer your phones. Do not reply to any texts or emails. All communication will go through one channel. Understood?" A chorus of yes echoed through the cafe. "We have our list of demands," she continued, holding up a folder. "It is clear, it is non-negotiable, and it will be delivered by Alara, Maya, and me as your representatives. We wait for them to reach out to us. We hold the power right now. Let's not forget that." My phone started ringing. The caller ID said Mark. I looked at it, then silenced the call and put the phone face down on the table. A ripple of similar activity went through the room as dozens of other phones were silenced. The message was clear. You can't talk to us individually. You have to talk to all of us. It took less than 30 minutes. An unfamiliar number called Sarah's phone. She had designated her personal number, one not on any company records, as our single point of contact. She put it on speakerphone. "This is Sarah Jennings." "Sarah, this is David Chan, Head of Human Resources." His voice was strained, attempting a calm he clearly did not feel. "We seem to have a situation here. There appears to be a mass absence of our female employees. We're concerned. Is everyone all right?" Sarah's reply was perfectly cool. "We are all more than all right, David. We are, for the first time, united. There was a pause on the other end. I see. Could you shed some light on what this is about? Mr. Davies is very concerned. I'm sure he is, Sarah said, a hint of ice in her tone. We have a list of conditions that need to be met for us to return to work. We are prepared to discuss them with Mr. Davies and only Mr. Davies. And you, David, can be there to take notes. The sheer audacity of her statement made several women around us gasp, then grin. Now is not really a good time, Sarah, David stammered. We're in the middle of the summit. Oh, we're keenly aware of that, Sarah replied smoothly. In fact, your good time is our entire point. You have a room full of your most important clients and investors waiting to hear about projects that cannot be presented because the women who built them are standing right here with me. So, you can either find the time or you can explain to your audience why half of your company has vanished. Your choice. We'll be at the Daily Grind coffee shop across the plaza. You have 1 hour. She hung up. A wave of triumphant laughter and applause swept through the coffee shop. It was a masterful move. She had set the terms, the time, and the location. She had turned the tables completely. The next hour was a long one. We drank coffee, we talked in low, excited voices, and we waited. We knew they had no choice. Canceling the summit would be a PR catastrophe. Continuing with it was impossible. They had to negotiate. 45 minutes later, a black town car pulled up outside. Mr. Davies, our formidable CEO, got out. He was not smiling. His face was a thundercloud of fury. Behind him, a pale and shaken David Chun scurried to keep up. Sarah, Maya, and I met them at the door of the coffee shop. Mr. Davies, Sarah said calmly. Thank you for joining us. Cut the pleasantries, Sarah, he snarled, his voice a low growl. What in God's name do you think you're doing? You're sabotaging my company. Your company? I spoke for the first time, my voice quiet but firm. I believe it's our company too. And we have discovered that our stake in it has been systemically undervalued. I watched his eyes. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Not as Alara, the brilliant but quiet data nerd, but as an adversary. Let's go somewhere we can talk, he said, gesturing to a back table. No, I said. We'll talk here. I gestured to the room full of women, all watching us, their faces silent and supportive. They all need to hear this. There are no more backroom deals. No more quiet conversations. There is only transparency from this moment on. His jaw tightened, but he knew he was beaten. He was on our turf, playing by our rules. The three of us sat down at a table with him and David Chun. The rest of the women gathered around, standing in a silent, powerful circle. I took the folder from Sarah and slid it across the table. Here are our terms, I said. I suggest you read them carefully. He opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page. I watched the color drain from his face as he read our first demand. An immediate, company-wide pay equity adjustment to eliminate the gender pay gap, retroactive for a period of 5 years. He looked up, his eyes blazing. This is insane. It would cost millions. It's the millions you've already cost us. Maya shot back, her voice ringing with passion. It's not a bonus. It's the money we earned. He read the other demands. A full independent audit of all salary and promotion practices. The establishment of a transparent, formula-based compensation system with clear salary bands for every role. A new democratically elected oversight committee, with the majority of female members, to ensure compliance. Mandatory annual anti-bias training for all managers. This is blackmail, he hissed. No, I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. This is a bill. It is long past due. You have built a world-class company on a foundation of brilliant work. But you have also built it on a foundation of systemic inequality. You have profited from our silence and our belief in a meritocracy that you knew to be a lie. Today that lie ends. I leaned forward. Here is your choice, Mr. Davies. You can sign an agreement in principle to every single one of these demands right here, right now. A legally binding memorandum of understanding that we will all witness. If you do, we will return to work this afternoon and your summit will proceed, albeit with a slightly delayed schedule. Or you can refuse. And in 1 hour this folder, along with the mountain of data we have compiled, will be in the hands of every major news outlet and tech blog in the country. We will see who your investors and clients believe then. The choice is yours. He stared at me, then at Sarah, then at Maya. He looked around the room, at the sea of determined female faces watching him, waiting. He saw no fear. He saw no doubt. He saw only resolve. He was a businessman. He knew how to calculate risk. He looked at the folder. He looked at the 150 women who held the fate of his company in their hands. He let out a long, slow breath of defeat. The fight went out of his eyes, replaced by a weary, resentful resignation. "Get me a pen," he said to David Chun. The story doesn't end there, of course. The signing of that agreement was the end of the battle, but the beginning of a long, arduous war. The weeks and months that followed were challenging. The atmosphere in the office was thick with tension. Some of our male colleagues were supportive, even admiring. Others were openly hostile, resentful of the changes, muttering about special treatment. The trust that had been shattered was not easily repaired. But we held the company to its word. The audit happened. The numbers were even worse than we had thought. The back pay was distributed, life-changing sums of money for many women. The new, transparent salary system was implemented. The oversight committee, with me as its first chair, was formed. I never got my little kingdom back. I returned to my corner cubicle, but it was no longer a sanctuary. It was a command post. My relationship with the company was forever changed. I was no longer a believer. I was a watchdog. My work on Project Nightingale had been what defined me. Now my work on the committee, the fight for true and lasting equity, became my real legacy. The walkout changed everything. Changed the company. It changed the lives of 150 women. And most of all, it changed me. I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, not in my ability to write code, but in my ability to speak truth to power, to stand up not just for myself but for all of us. I found my voice in the collective silence of our stand, and it's a voice I have never lost since. We often find ourselves in situations where the path of least resistance is silence. We see something that is wrong, a small injustice or a large one, and it is always easier to look away, to tell ourselves it's not our fight, to go back to our desks and get on with our day. But sometimes a moment comes, a piece of paper is left on a printer, and you are faced with a choice. And so I leave you with this question. Have you ever been faced with a choice like that? A moment where silence was the easy path, but your conscience, your very soul demanded you make a sound? What did you do? Thank you for listening to her revenge arc. If this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories. Your voice matters. Let's use it.